So I think we would all agree that vocals are probably the most important thing in the mix 99% of the time. So talk to us about how you approach vocals. What would you do in an ideal world, and what do you do if you're having problems with a vocal?
First thing for me with vocals is getting the right mic on that singer. Some mics work better than others. You know, the 58 is kind of the go-to mic for a lot of guys, but and it can sound great, but it's not always the best thing for someone. So if I have some options and I'm having a hard time, I'll try and switch the mic out. And then I also want to check on their mic technique. I like having singers try and stay as consistent as possible in where they're standing relative to the mic. Because with vocal mics especially, you get so much proximity effect, which is going to affect your tone when someone's right on there. So if you've got people who are, you know, moving away and towards it constantly, it's really tough to get a consistent tone out of a vocal. So trying to make sure that everything is good for them in their monitors so that they're going to stay sort of in the same place, and I can control the dynamics up front a lot more, because I ride vocals always when I'm mixing. I don't think I ever, you know, take my finger off a vocal, like the lead vocal fader, for more than a couple of seconds at a time. It's, you know, 98 to 99% of the time my hand is on that lead vocal, because that's the big thing. Next big thing for me with vocals that I think is real important is you just got to watch the low mids, because that's where things start to get muddy, and it just starts to turn their sound to mush. And the biggest thing I hear from other guys who are having problems with their vocals is they're trying to make things real fat and real warm, and there's something cool about it, but at the sake of, you know, clarity, they lose the clarity in order to get this warmth. So you have to kind of find, you know, a compromise somewhere in there. But for me, I want them clear and I want them to cut all the time. So it's those low mids. I mean, any kind of room you've got where the acoustics aren't so bad, that tends to be the area I think that really starts to roll around and get nasty. So just take it out, and then you can start. You know, if you get that out, a lot of times you don't need to boost as much presence on them. Sometimes you might still need a little bit of something. 2 to 4K, somewhere in there for me seems to work good. But it's getting the low mids and then getting any of that kind of nasally sort of stuff out of there, which can be 800 to 1200, you know, somewhere in there. Just start doing that. On vocals, I tend to really cut a lot before I ever start to boost on an EQ. And it's just an old habit I've got. Compression, you know, I tend to not compress them too hard, but I do it, and sometimes I'll use that upwards, like an upwards compression kind of thing, parallel compression technique to have, like, you know, one vocal that's kind of my standard vocal sound, and then I'll bus it to another channel or group or whatever I can get, and then really crank down hard on that. And pushing that up in there sometimes can help it cut against a really loud band.
Cool. So you mentioned if you're having problems with a vocalist, you might go to the monitor guy and make sure that they can hear themselves okay. You want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I think monitors for vocalists are really, really important. If it's not right for them and their ears, they're not going to be confident, they're not going to sing as loud. When you get into in-ears, it can be real easy to not get enough out of a vocalist, versus if you're working with wedges, you know, they might be screaming versus singing, and then you're having a whole different problem. But for me, you know, if I'm really having problems, if I've got a vocalist who just won't stay on a mic, first thing I'm probably going to do is call a monitor guy, or if it's me, if I'm doing it from front of house, I might just slowly start cheating that down in their ears or in their wedge, depending on, you know, what their monitor situation is. Because if they start to hear themselves softer, they'll get louder, they'll get closer to the mic. It's really, it's almost like a psychological thing. And you don't want to go, you know, too much. You really have to go slow, because you want it to be subtle and you want them to not notice what you're doing. And Or you can just go talk to them, but that would be easy.
So Dave, talk to us about vocal reverb and delay.
I'm not a big effects guy. I think a lot of guys, they just pour it on, and to me, everything a lot of times just starts to sound like a hairband record from the late 80s. And right now, I don't, there's not a lot of reverb. For me, what I'm going for is more of a natural kind of thing. Sometimes you have to put some effects on it to get things to sound natural. But when I'm doing live stuff, most of the time I'm in a room that has an acoustic space in it, and you're going to get a natural kind of reverb to it. So it's really just, kind of adding to that just to make it feel natural. A dry vocal, sometimes it just really can sound weird. Sometimes, though, it can work for a song, but I tend to try and get things natural. Lately, I've been doing a lot with setting pre-delays and reverb times and setting them tempo specific to a song if I can do it. If not, I try to get just sort of a generic setting that's kind of works and go with it. If it's a run and gun situation and I don't know what song coming next and there is no script or set list or anything like that, I just try and get something generic that works. But for me, the goal with verb is to get it to sound natural, and then sometimes you can make stuff sound a little bigger. So I want reverb in there. I don't want people to notice it. For me, it's just something. It's a trick in a lot of ways to make things sound more natural and to sound a little bigger.